In the spring of 1940, France believed a concrete wall could stop an army. The Maginot Line stretched for miles, a fortress of steel and stone. Behind it, French soldiers waited through a strange, silent winter of war. Newspapers called it the Phony War, a conflict without a single shot. On the other side of the border, Germany was drawing a different plan. At dawn on May 10, 1940, the silence finally broke. German bombers roared over the Netherlands before the sun had fully risen. Paratroopers dropped from the sky onto Dutch bridges and airfields. Belgium woke to the same thunder, its border forts under sudden attack. Luxembourg fell within hours, its tiny army overwhelmed almost instantly. In Paris and London, generals believed this was the main German thrust. They rushed their best divisions north into Belgium to meet it. It was exactly the trap the German High Command had hoped for. Far to the south, a second force moved through a forest no one watched. The Ardennes was thick, hilly, and considered impossible for tanks to cross. Columns of German armor pushed through it for 3 days straight. On May 13th, they reached the Meuse River near the town of Sedan. Stuka dive bombers screamed down, clearing the far bank of French defenders. German engineers threw pontoon bridges across the water under constant fire. Panzer divisions rolled across the Meuse into open French countryside. The French line at Sedan, thought unbreakable, had lasted barely 2 days. On May 14th, German bombers struck the Dutch city of Rotterdam. Entire blocks of the old city center were reduced to rubble and fire. The following day, the Netherlands surrendered to end the destruction. With Sedan broken, German tanks now had open ground ahead of them. General Heinz Guderian pushed his panzers forward far faster than headquarters expected. French commanders struggled to even locate where the German spearhead was. Telephone lines were cut, and radio reports arrived hours too late. On May 17th, the Belgian capital of Brussels fell without a major battle. Antwerp fell the very next day, its port now in German hands. Refugees clogged every road south, fleeing with carts, bicycles, and suitcases. Farm animals wandered loose past abandoned cars stalled bumper to bumper. By May 20th, German tanks reached the English Channel near Abbeville. In a single week, they had cut the Allied armies clean in two. Hundreds of thousands of British, French, and Belgian troops were now trapped. On May 21st, Allied forces launched a counterattack near the town of Arras. British tanks briefly pushed German infantry into confused retreat. But without reinforcements, the attack stalled and was pushed back by evening. It was the last real chance to cut the German corridor in half. The trapped Allied armies began falling back toward the coastal town of Dunkirk. On May 24th, Hitler issued an order that would puzzle historians for decades. German tanks, closing in for the kill, were ordered to halt outside the port. The pause gave Allied forces precious days to organize a desperate escape. On May 26th, Operation Dynamo began along the beaches of Dunkirk. Long lines of soldiers stood waist-deep in water waiting for rescue. Destroyers, ferries, and hundreds of small private boats crossed the channel. Fishing trawlers and pleasure yachts carried exhausted men off the sand. Luftwaffe bombers struck the beaches and the harbor throughout the operation. On May 28th, Belgium's King Leopold ordered his army to surrender. His decision left the Allied flank at Dunkirk even more exposed. Still, the evacuation continued under smoke, gunfire, and burning oil tankers. By June 4th, over 300,000 men had reached British shores. It was framed as a miracle, though Churchill called it also a defeat. France had lost the north and now stood almost entirely alone. On June 5th, Germany launched a new offensive codenamed Fallrot. This time the target was not Belgium, but the heart of France itself. Weary French divisions dug in along the Somme and Aisne rivers. Their new defensive line was named after General Maxime Weygand. It held for barely 4 days before German armor broke through again. On June 10th, Italy declared war on France, opening a second front. That same day, the French government abandoned Paris for the city of Bordeaux. Government ministries loaded truckloads of documents and fled south in convoy. Millions of French civilians joined them in a mass exodus from the capital. Roads south of Paris turned into rivers of refugees under a hot June sun. Some pushed prams loaded with mattresses instead of children. Others pulled carts piled with furniture no wagon could truly hold. On June 14th, German soldiers entered Paris without firing a single shot. The city had been declared open to spare it from bombing and battle. German troops marched down the Champs-Élysées in tight, disciplined columns. A swastika flag was raised over the Eiffel Tower by German soldiers. Parisian cafes sat empty, their shutters closed against the occupying army. 2 days later, on June 16th, Prime Minister Paul Reynaud resigned his post. Marshal Philippe Pétain, a hero of the First World War, took his place. On June 17th, Pétain addressed the nation over the radio. He told the French people that the fighting must now come to an end. That same day, a young officer named Charles de Gaulle boarded a plane for London. He carried only 2 suitcases and a determination not to surrender. On June 18th, de Gaulle spoke from a small BBC studio in London. His 4-minute broadcast reached only a handful of listeners inside France. He insisted that France had lost a battle, but not the war itself. Few in France heard those words on the night they were spoken. Meanwhile, German negotiators prepared a very specific location for the surrender. They chose the same railway carriage used for Germany's surrender in 1918. It had been pulled from a museum and placed in the forest of Compiègne. On June 22nd, French and German delegations met inside that carriage. Hitler arrived personally to witness the signing of the armistice. French officers signed the document that ended 6 weeks of fighting. The armistice split France into an occupied north and a so-called free south. The southern zone would be governed from the spa town of Vichy. On June 25th, the armistice came into full effect at last. Guns fell silent across a country that had fought for barely 6 weeks. Nearly 90,000 French soldiers had been killed in that short span. Almost 2 million more had been taken prisoner by German forces. German losses numbered around 45,000 dead across the same campaign. The Maginot Line, never truly breached, now stood irrelevant behind enemy lines. Its guns pointed east, useless against an army that had come from elsewhere. France, once considered Europe's strongest army, had collapsed in 46 days. In London, a small group of French officers refused to accept defeat. They gathered around de Gaulle to form what became the Free French Forces. From exile, they would carry the fight forward for 4 more years. The fall of France reshaped the entire balance of the Second World War. Britain now stood alone against Germany across a narrow strip of water. What began as a 6-week campaign would echo for the rest of the war.